Again, I didn't get a chance to ask you this because I know a lot of definitely people in our audience is going to know you from doing the stuff with Detective Comics with Batman and Bane and Nightfall, especially. I
Mhm.
have to ask because that was early. Was that 93, 94, right when that came out?
93.
Yeah,
93. Mhm.
93. So that was the early 90s, and I was a wee lad back then. And I want to know what that reception was like, because we know how it is now, especially with this whole Dark Knight trilogy and how it was a new craze, Bane becoming a new craze. But at the time, how was that general reception with Nightfall and it being this such a massive story? What was it like back in the Gap?
It was huge. It was unprecedented. It was a very heady time in comics. You had it was somewhat inflated because you had speculator dollars coming in
Hmm.
with the death of Superman and with the Nightfall storyline. You had a lot of dollars coming into the business that weren't necessarily readers of the books. So that inflated print runs, but money's money,
Yeah.
and the retailers were doing well, the publishers were doing well, as a result, the creatives were doing well because the royalties were rock solid on those books.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting because I know really everything that I got from it. Like I was a wee lad, so it was more so going into the mid to the latter half of the '90s when I was really getting into this stuff. So it was one of those things that I had to kind of experience in retrospect. So it's cool to hear those stories that we know were massive. Some of us didn't get to like live through it. And again, it was a
Mhm.
different era back then, right? It was the access to information was different. Even how we're releasing comics has gone through
Right.
some massive changes. So it's cool to hear how it went down during the time, right, and how massive
Mhm.
that was. We all know that, of course, in retrospect, that Nightfall was huge. So I wanted to hear from the man himself, like what that experience was during that time, because I know that was good for you. So outside, go
There's a
ahead.
zeitgeist that hits every once in a while,
Yeah.
and that was the period, when it definitely hit because what's interesting, and a lot of people don't know this, is that, the various offices, you had your Superman office and your Batman office, and, they weren't in touch with each other about what they were doing.
Mm.
So, the Superman office didn't know we were gonna be breaking Batman's back, and the Batman office did not know they were planning on killing Superman.
Oh wow.
Similar storylines in that you're taking your main hero out and replacing him with something new.
Hmm.
And the reason that we did those things were different for each camp. The Superman camp had one reason, the Batman camp had a very different reason for doing it. But it's interesting to note that they came together with the same type of idea independently of one another.
That's crazy. Well, I guess I didn't originally plan on bringing this up, but I want to know, what was it like? Okay, so Nightfall, Bane, backbreaking, all of that. Whose idea was that? Is it one of those where the DC editorial was like, "Hey, this is something that we need to happen"? Was it something that Chuck presented? Like, how did that whole thing go down?
Well, back then, you had editorial autonomy. Denny O'Neil was the Batman editor, and he was Batman everything. He was the gatekeeper of the IP and made sure that everybody was on model about who this character was and all that. And it was really Denny's idea to
Okay.
replace Batman because at the time the most popular books selling were The Punisher and and Wolverine. And he was getting flack from fans saying that the reason that people die in Gotham City is because Batman doesn't kill his villains. He needs to be more like the Punisher, more quote unquote realistic, like the Punisher and Wolverine, and take out his bad guys. Well, from a publishing point of view, that's really bad because what are we going to do? Kill the Joker? I mean, that's a golden cow,
Right, right, right,
and
right.
kill off his. So, um, what Denny decided was let's give them what they want and show them why it's a bad idea. So we're going to take Bruce Wayne out. We're going to put in a Jean Paul Valet as a psychotic Batman who ends up killing people and show them why we don't want this. Well, it worked too well because the fans so hated Jean-Paul Vallée that sales were going down
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
by the time Knight's End came about. And so we had to push things forward a bit and get rid of him and bring back Bruce.
That's crazy. See,
Yeah.
I wanted to know whose idea that was, like, with making that happen, because I know sometimes it's like, hey, we pitched this idea. I was talking with Palmiotti the other day about Marvel Knights and how that was conceptualized kind of in the latter half of the 90s, and it was one of the I think they had a little more autonomy. It seemed like it was like Marvel that was like, hey, here's these characters. You mentioned one of them being a Punisher. Just, hey, figure it out, kind of do something. But they were at a different state, right? Because I think they were on the edge of bankruptcy during that time. So it's cool to hear, like, whose idea was it? Was it, the editorial? Was it Chuck, or was it yourself? So it's cool to hear that. Thanks for watching. Be sure to head over to Rippaverse.com to check out our comic book company. We have books, plenty of merchandise, and even some glorious animations from Rippaverse Studios. Next up, possibly our most anticipated book thus far, Yaira.